The United States makes the UN work when it wants it to work. And that is exactly the way it should be, because the only question for the United States is what's in our national interest.
My name is John, and the International Criminal Court is now in session. It is October 23rd, 2025, and once again we are going to look at the situation within Ukraine. So, let's start. First of all, we are going to talk a bit about the Zaporizhzhia direction. The Russians have reportedly began their advances, as I stated in one of my previous videos, in the village of Malatakhmachka. This is the sizable settlement before you entered the strategic town of Orikov. And so far, there have been mixed bag results for the Russians here. Reports of big losses in armed vehicles, but other than that, though, there have been reports of limited Russian gains in the area. As of right now, I cannot make any conclusions on this, neither can Suryak, so yeah, we're going to have to wait a little while before giving basically our overall judgment on what the Russians did here. So, let's move on. In the Gulaipol / Dnepropetrovsk direction, the Russians have continued their advances in this area. They have seized complete control over the villages of Pavlovka and Privlia, and they apparently have now advanced across these farmlands here. And it's putting the villages of Krasnohirsky and Privlilne under extreme pressure, and I wouldn't be surprised if the AFU does not put up a big fight for these areas and crosses the Yancha River to avoid an encirclement. And also, the Russians have reportedly begun advancing towards Gulaipol itself from the eastern side, trying to seize the villages of Vasily and Zeleny Gai. Though we don't have a lot of progress, though, in these areas to report on just yet. Though what we can definitely assume is that the Gulaipol offensive is definitely happening this fall and winter, and it's probably very likely that Gulaipol is probably going to fall in the next 2 to 3 months. So probably by the end of 2025 or early 2026. It will definitely fall, but I don't know when, but it will definitely fall. Now, some big news from the actual, proper Dnepropetrovsk direction. The Russians have not only consolidated their gains within Filia, but they have taken over the village of Ivanovka, and I believe that this is the first sizable settlement for the Russians in the Dnepropetrovsk region. And a lot of people from, who I've talked to have been taken completely surprised by this because they didn't think that it would be that easy for the Russians to cross the Volga River. And they thought that the Russians would get bogged down here, but no. They not only succeeded in taking Ivanovka, but they have started advancing north of it. And they're also reportedly advancing eastwards, too, towards the strategic town or village of Novopavlovka, which would bring them within striking distance of the town of Mizova. If you ask me what I think is going to happen this later fall and winter, the Russians are going to try to break out from Ivanovka here and towards as far as the village of Vasily here in Dnepropetrovsk. By taking this, they will cut this strategic road that supplies not only Mizova, but also Prezyana as well, and effectively Pokrovsk. And speaking of which, the Russians will be advancing towards Pokrovsk later in the year as well, during the closing months of 2025. There are some reports, especially according to the pro-Russian Telegram account Z Committee, that Novomy Khalivka has been recaptured by the Russians, but we don't have 100% confirmation of this, though I think it is very likely. Now, for the big fish itself, the Pokrovsk direction. I think it is safe to say at this point that it is on its last leg. The city of Pokrovsk, the city of Myanograd, and the strategic town of Rudensky are all about to fall to Russia. Myanograd has recently just seen its first instance of fighting within the city itself, and the Russians have reportedly taken around 2 to 3 blocks of Myanograd. And I'm expecting this number to grow in the coming days, because there is a report circulating, and especially according to Suryak, Radov, and even Divjin, that the Russians have already started fleeing this pocket. They have given up the fight for Pokrovsk, Myanograd, and Rudensky. The recent breakthroughs of the Russian army in Pokrovsk, or Krasnaya Amisk, as some people call it by, have basically convinced the armed forces of Ukraine's high command to not only give up the city, but to also give up its outskirts too. And with the Russians now being able to solidify their control over the areas across from the railway station here, which is here, by the way, the Ukrainians are effectively finished here. And even though they still control some industrial zones, and I guess these commie blocks here, it doesn't really matter. The majority of the city is under Russian control. Like, it is no longer any, there's no way to doubt this at all. They now control the park, the Central Park here. They control the commie blocks here. They control the roads. I mean, there's really not much the AFU can do here left. There is no doubt that Pokrovsk is definitely going to be falling soon. And according to some Russian Telegram channels, they have given the armed forces of Ukraine at least around 4 days left for them to leave the city, or else they're going to obliterate them on their way out the door. And reportedly, they are actually doing just that. Myanograd is still, as I said, mostly under AFU control, but I don't think they're going to really put up a big fight for the city. They are going to flee it and not really resist too much. And Rudensky, I can definitely say the same as well. In fact, there was a recent geolocation that pointed out that the Russians have advanced further deeper into the town, and it looks like they are reaching the limits, like the administrative border of Rudensky. And to be quite honest with you guys, I don't think there's any armed forces of Ukraine soldiers left here. I believe that all this area should at least be gray, because AFU doesn't control it, but neither the Russian army controls it as of right now. But I am definitely certain that the time is now appropriate to turn this area here, these areas here, into a gray zone. Not because it's contested, but I think the AFU is on the way out the door. So yeah, Rudensky is going to surrender without a fight. Well, at least the remainder of it. Myanograd will surrender without a fight. Northern Pokrovsk will fall without a fight. Basically, everything in this pocket here will be gone. And once that happens, then Dobropila will be next. The Dnipropetrovsk region will be busted wide open. I mean, I don't know what the AFU can really do to counter the upcoming Russian offensive this late fall and winter. They're going to have a good place to do to base their operations in, which will be this area here. And also, there's even some growing bad news, by the way, for the Ukrainians, especially in the Dobropila direction. Now, before I get to that, I should mention that Kutry Vyar is now reportedly back under AFU control. There's even geolocations to confirm this, and around 10-something, if not more, soldiers have surrendered to the Ukrainians. Now, while that is a setback for Russia, they are, however, succeeding in this area here, this pocket. Apparently, Shakove, the central part of it, is now coming under Russian control. And because of that, I don't think that the Ukrainians are going to put up a fight for Volodymyrivka for much longer. I mean, they've been trying to fight for it like the last month or so, but they haven't been able to keep the Russians out of the village completely. And it looks like time is running out for them here. And once Shakove falls, then nothing is going to really stop the Russians from taking Sofivka and Turetsky. And once also the Russians put an end to the Pokrovsk pocket, then they're going to have a lot of operational freedom, like on what they want to do next. I mean, it's going to free up a lot of their resources. Like, they'll be now able to deal with this area and the Rapila direction too. Though I believe that the Russians are going to try to maybe enter Dnepropetrovsk first. Like, maybe, like, hit this area, like, first here, by the way, before they go into Dobrapila. But I could be very wrong. Like, they might just go straight for Dobrapila, like, right away. But, yeah, otherwise, I don't think the Ukrainians are going to really have a good time in the later, like, twilight phase of this year. Because once this area is cleared, along with this area, then I honestly don't know how they're going to be able to defend themselves against the Russians, which will have control of all these powerful fortified areas. Now, in the direction of Konstantinovka, the Russians have reportedly taken majority control over Pleshivka. Now, as I stated, sorry if I slipped up there for a moment, but Russians have, according to the MOD themselves, which is based in the Kremlin, that they have taken all of Pleshivka, though Radov and Suryak don't agree with them completely. Though, I think as of right now, they do control majority of it, but they don't have 100% control over it. Ivanopilia is now also reportedly contested, and I believe that this is one of the last settlements before you enter Konstantinovka. And there's even some reports, by the way, that the Russians have started fighting for Konstantinovka itself. Like, but also at the same time, it appears that there seems to be a lot of conflict over, I guess, this pocket of Ukrainians here. And also, there is a bit of a dispute, rather or not, if the Russians have actually entered and consolidated some control within the city itself. If you ask for my opinion, I don't think it's really time yet for a battle of Konstantinovka, because they still have to clear not only these areas first, but they also have to clear these villages southwest of Chasiv Yar. They have to do that. But yeah, until then, I don't think Konstantinovka is going to fall anytime soon, at least in the short term, but I am expecting it to be contested in 2026. Now, as for the Siversk direction, the Russians have advanced a little further. They have now taken control of this little reservoir here and are about to fight it out for Siversk. And then, going into Liman direction, the Russians have advanced, crossed this forested area quite easily, and are now within basically a stone's throw of Liman. And if you ask for my opinion, guys, I honestly don't know if the Ukrainians are going to really put up a rough fight for Liman. Because here's the problem. This is largely resembling, if you guys remember what happened 3 years ago during the first battle of Liman, the Russians took all the high grounds. They basically encircled it from like 1, 2, 3, or 4 sides or so. And the Ukrainians had essentially no way out. And then, not to mention, the Russians blew up many of the supply bridges that would go between Liman and Slavyansk and the Kramatorsk. So, for those reasons alone, I honestly don't know if the Ukrainians are really going to bother trying to fight for Liman, because you look at the situation right now, it's completely screwed. With Torske and Zarachny gone, we're basically just getting a direct sequel to the 2022 battles, like you saw in May and late September to early October. That's what it's looking like. And according to Suryak, it appears that the Russians are also advancing further west towards the border with Kharkov region. Though I think it's a little too early to say whether or not if the Russians are actually serious about pushing towards the Osko River here in this direction. Though I am absolutely certain that they're going to do that. And then once that's done, they're going to maybe try to retake Izium and then push further south towards Slavyansk. I don't think they're going to take Slavyansk until they have Siversk, Liman, and Izium all under their control. But once they do, then, yeah, I think Slavyansk and Kramatorsk are cooked. And I believe that we may see a battle for both of these cities in 2026. Now, looking to Kupiansk's direction, again, not looking good for the Ukrainians here either. Apparently, the Russians have encircled a small group of Ukrainians here. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't think, and this is just like Rudensky, by the way, I don't really know if there's any Ukrainians here left. So it makes me wonder if Syriac should even bother keeping this area in a gray zone. Like, these guys are going to surrender anyway. And also, there was reports of a supposed Ukrainian counteroffensive being attempted, but it looks like it failed for now. But yeah, I don't know what they're thinking. I honestly don't think there's much they can really do at this point. I think it's too little too late for a counteroffensive, especially now that the Russians control basically the main part of Kupiansk itself. And now with some of their guys encircled here, the situation's completely screwed for them. And yeah, I'm expecting this place to now fall within the next 1 to 2 months. In addition, I also want to report that the Russians are close to connecting their forces within this area here to the guys in Kupiansk direction. The Russians are trying to take the village of Bolodivka, and as far as I can see, they are contesting it so far, and they are very close to connecting with the Zapad group of forces in Kupiansk. And once they're able to do this, then they'll essentially be able to then start the greater Kharkov counteroffensive. And also, in more bad news for the Ukrainians in the Kharkov region, the Russians have basically taken full control of western Volchansk. As you can see, it's all been cleared out. Well, maybe except for this, but it's not really that important. And then all that's left of the armed forces of Ukraine and Volchansk is these commie blocks here, and I guess these low-rise houses. But other than that, they seem pretty finished there, and I wouldn't be surprised if Volchansk is gone by the start of the new year in 2026. And then you look at the area outside of Taiki. The Russians have cleared some forested areas here, and that will be it. So, there's no news, by the way, coming from Sumi, so don't ask. But yeah, anyway, I hope you guys found this video informative, interesting, entertaining. It doesn't really matter. I just hope you enjoyed the video. And tell me in the comment section below what you think of the recent updates coming from Ukraine. So, I hope every single one of you has a great day, and I'll see you all in the next 3 days. Have a great night, everybody, and take care. Bye-bye.